Good evening. As I was searching for excerpts from the Living Stream Ministry about the two trees, having a very helpful interaction with another sister regarding how we have been taught about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and how that has been used to basically shut people up who have experienced abuse, who have been molested, who are being lied to. I've experienced all those things, and people saying, you're on the wrong tree. You're on the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they just basically shut you up. And according to the ministry, in the name of like not wanting to partake of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and not to experience spiritual death. So very, very helpful guidance from somebody online that commented at the name of Max Springer. Thank you. I felt like I was newly saved, realizing that there were certain very, very damaging, misleading interpretations related to that portion in the Bible. But in my searching, then I came across other excerpts, and it's just so disturbing. So what I want to say very, very clearly, no matter what shepherdingwords.com says about the Living Stream Ministry's view of sisters, or Brother Lee's view of sisters, or whatever, there's some very hurtful things spoken and written and published by the Living Stream Ministry and or its leaders. And I'm just going to read some of those. And yes, they aren't fully in context, so feel free to look at the context. I'm not hiding anything. It's just that time is of essence. So this is from God's Eternal Intention and Satan's Counterplot by Witness Lee, in a subsection called The Two Trees. He says, Witness Lee says, "Then God took this man whom he had created and set him before two trees. Was not this a strange thing to do? I would have thought God would take Adam and talk with him in lecture after lecture, training him in how to behave. He would explain that Eve was his counterpart, that Adam must love her, that she must be the mother of his children, and that Adam must be the head. Then God should have taken Eve and spent time to train her. She would need even longer time, because females always make trouble. If Genesis 2 had been written like this, I surely would have thought it was a wonderful chapter of the Holy Scriptures written by God." And then later he says, "Sisters, Satan's way is to tempt you to open your mouth." Okay, so then in Serving Sisters in the Church Life by Witness Lee, he says that the proper church life, first of all, depends on the sisters. And yet sisters have been mocked by him, being called holy sisters in a way that is talking about them being rebellious, but calling them three holy sisters. You know what? Holy is not something to mock. Holy sisters should not be a derogatory term. And that was coined by, I believe, Philip Lee, who I'll get to later. Anyway, he talks about how Paul recommended a particular sister and then greeted mostly sisters in the end of the book of Romans. But then he says this: "As long as you sisters are serving in the church, there is value to the Lord. Anything you do in the church has meaning. Whatever you do outside the church doesn't mean much. In my Christian life, I have seen many good sisters loving others, taking care of others, but all outside the church. Eventually, what they did became pitiful because it was done outside the church. What the Lord wants is the serving in the church, serving for the church, and serving the church directly. This is a major point. Only in one unique thing are the sisters allowed to take the lead. Romans 16 does not have such a revelation that the sisters may take the lead to risk their necks for the church. That they may take the lead to risk their necks for the church. For this reason, Aquila is behind Prisca. The Lord would not allow the sisters to take the lead in any other matter, not their spirituality, not their spiritual tastes, not for anything else. To do so is the real breaking of the principle, and the sisters should not do that. But among thousands of things, in this one unique matter, the sisters may take the lead for the practical church life. The sisters have to be so bold only for the church life, not for their own spirituality. Spirituality does not mean that much. The only thing that is so meaningful is the church life. How can you have a proper church life without caring about being properly spiritual? Not in the quote spiritual way, but I believe the more spiritual you are, the more human you are, the more properly human you are. Anyway, I have so much to say about this because there weren't quotes around spirituality, and yet we sing hymns, then only spiritual will be and touch the life of glory. Does that not apply to sisters? It says, the sisters need to be encouraged to take the lead in their families for the church life, not for teaching, not for spirituality, not even for gospel preaching. If the sisters would do this, if the sisters would not do this, they could not be up to the standard. They are not qualified before the Lord if they're not taking the lead in their families for the church life. Okay. Then it says, many times, these are different points in this, but many times the sisters would talk about certain doctrines, but in the eyes of the Lord, their talk would actually be considered gossip because there's no serving in it. None of those talking needed those matters for their growth in life, so their talk became gossip. Paul uses this word in 1 Timothy 5:13, where he says, they also learn to be idle, going around from house to house, and they are not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. Busybodies are meddlers, interfering in the affairs of others. Okay, I agree, but listen to this interpretation. The things which should not be spoken may be good things, good doctrines, even very heavenly and spiritual, but there's no need for the talk about them. If all sisters would be so much burdened with the serving spirit, not one of them would have time, the strength, the energy, the attention, or the heart to talk about anything that does not serve something of life to others. The sisters should be fully occupied with the serving spirit. If you sisters mean business to be serving ones in the church, first of all, you have to learn not to talk at all. Many of the sisters would consider gossip just as idle words, but would not include the vain talking of doctrine. But I would tell you strongly that the vain talk concerning doctrine is also gossip. Your talking should be the serving of something to others that they need for their growth in life. Because you realize that certain ones need this point, you serve it to them for their growth. If they do not need that point, and yet you talk with them about it, your talk is also idle talk. Whether or not your talk is idle talk is not determined by the subject of your talking, but by whether or not you are talking but by whether or not you are talking, what you are talking about is needed by the other one. If it is not needed, whatever you say is an idle word. The Bible calls this kind of word an idle word because you are idle. You have nothing to do. You have no serving to occupy you. Therefore, you have the energy. You have even the heart. You have the time to speak those idle things. Serving includes both material things and spiritual things. The sisters have to serve the younger ones, the spiritual life. They have to serve all the dear ones, the spiritual growth. How, if you don't care about spirituality, do you serve the spiritual life and spiritual growth to all the dear ones and to the young ones? If the church is going to grow and be built up, first of all, the sisters have to learn not to talk. How do you become ones who minister life if you never talk? This is a big lesson, Brotherly continues. In other words, the sisters have to learn what to talk about and what not to talk about. There are many good things that the sisters do not need to talk about. There is simply no need for them to talk about them. In these days, we have covered so much from Romans 8 concerning our need to walk according to the Spirit. I am more than sure that so many talks among the saints are not according to the Spirit. I do not mean only the talking about shopping and weddings, but the idle talk about doctrine. Brothers and sisters alike all must learn to be restricted first, not in our mind, but in our mouth. We should not think that to walk according to the Spirit only means to use our 2 feet. To walk according to the Spirit means to use our 2 lips. We have to learn to talk according to the Spirit. Okay, great. But then you also tell us not to even care about spirituality. How do you walk according to the Spirit without being spiritual? And then he continues, another line. In order to serve, first, you have to stop talking. You have to learn what to not talk about. Or to be simple, learn not to talk. Okay, so then in 2005, December 31st, Benson Phillips, who's now with the Lord, talked publicly about these sisters rebelling. If you read Jane Anderson's books, there's not rebellion. There was real shepherding and care for sisters among them, among themselves, and praying for one another and praying with one another and fellowshipping. And they were called a faction, a sect. And then he says, I was looking at a book the other day. I think it was probably The Thread of Gold. And in this book, the sister gives her life story. Well, she was a good sister at one time. Then eventually she was defeated by the enemy because of her natural affection toward other sisters. And she lost everything. Brothers, in the church life, we don't have any natural affection. We don't have friends, not friends naturally, but everything must be in the spirit. Okay, well, Paul said in 2 Timothy 3, 1-5, that in the last days, people will be lovers of themselves and without natural affection, having a form of godliness, but having denied its power. From such turn away. And then, okay, so then let's see how much time I've already spent. 11 minutes. Okay, I'm going to read an eyewitness account about Philip Lee. And I just think that these go together, because you can speak so despisingly of sisters and say that they need more talking to and more training because they cause so much problems. I know I'm probably a case in point. You can look at me and say, see what a problem Ruth is? I was molested by Philip Lee when I was 16 years old. I was kicked out of my house by my husband, who's a leading one, after 20-some years of marriage. I've never even kissed another man. I was so faithful, and I love him so much. And you leaders supported that, because I believe there's a very deep dishonoring of sisters who, it's said, Brother Lee, if you're just listening to Brother Lee, says are most important in the church life. He says we can see that the proper church life, first of all, depends on the sisters. Then why treat us this way? Why not stand for our safety? So here's an eyewitness account. Brother Warren Peterson was an eyewitness to the sinful act by Philip Lee and a sister at Living Stream in the late 1970s that all the elders came to know about, as did Brother Lee. The matter was denied by Philip vehemently, just as he denied to my dad. So the matter was denied by Philip vehemently when he was confronted by an elder, but the sister confessed with many tears and with much repentance of heart when elders came to her. At least one current elder in Anaheim knows this, and former elders in Anaheim also know this, along with other saints, and they know the following account as well of what happened. Warren said he was working at the Anaheim meeting hall one night when brothers were putting time in on the living stream part of the building to get certain things done. He had been there all day, and it was getting close to 10 p.m. when Brother Lee and Philip Lee approached him and Nolis Miller to ask if they could work longer. Neither brother wanted to stay, but Warren did, and was painting in a room adjoining the office where Philip and a sister were working. They obviously did not realize he was there, only 50 or 60 feet away, when they began to engage in mutually compromising immoral physical contact. Philip Lee, by the way, was married with 4 children. Well, no, in the 70s, not 4 children yet, but with multiple children. Sorry. Warren was dumbfounded as he continued to work, and the activity he witnessed continued also for about 10 to 15 minutes, at which time he finished what he was doing and went home, not knowing what to do about what he saw. The next day, a Saturday morning, he was determined to report the incident to an elder, and did so. He reported the matter to Francis Ball, who acknowledged that this was serious, and informed Warren that he would bring it up with the elders that morning. Francis did that, and then immediately got back to Warren, who was in the hall working with the maintenance brothers. The elders wanted to see him. He went to them, sat down, and opened to them about what he saw. They, of course, felt this was a very serious matter, one of them stating, "We will get this cleared up, Warren. We can't have this going on down there in the living stream. This will corrupt the church life." This same elder then did go to Brother Lee, and upon hearing the report, Brother Lee bowed his head and called on the Lord and said, "What shall we do?" The brothers said they had to do something and suggested Philip leave Anaheim and go to Taipei. Brother Lee did not think so. From that point, his word to the elders was that he would take care of his son. When the question was asked how he would take care of his son when he, Brother Lee, was at home sleeping while his son was working late with a sister, the answer was the same. He would take care of his son. Some time went by and Bill Freeman moved to Anaheim, and the elders wanted Warren to share with him what happened. Although leading brothers and Brother Lee knew about the situation, nothing was really happening, and the sister continued working with Philip at the Living Stream office. One of those former elders, Max Rappaport, wanting to get to the bottom of the story, took Philip to lunch and confronted Philip on the matter. Philip denied everything, nearly causing a fight in what was described by Max as a terrible scene in the restaurant. The elders then went to the sister to confront her on the matter, and she immediately confessed that the story was true and broke down. She was very sorry and expressed her remorse and repentance to the elders. It was not long after this that the sister, not Philip, was sent out of Anaheim, she along with her husband and family, moving away to Texas. Philip was allowed to continue in his position as manager at Living Stream Ministry for 10 years when reports of his immoral behavior again came forth in the late 1980s, and the pattern of non-discipline was repeated. Don Hardy was an eyewitness this time as he opened the door of Philip's office and walked in unannounced. His report is found in the book Deviating from the Path in the Lord's Recovery. Philip Lee was also reported to have touched sisters inappropriately as he took it upon himself to take their measurements for Living Stream Ministry uniforms worn in the late 1980s. So this was when I was one of those victims, and I didn't know that this was printed or this was reported by a brother. And it says that a sister reported her experience to her mother. When she told her husband, he chose not to believe the report. If that was me, then I may have told my mom, and I just don't remember that. I remember really struggling with what Philip had done to me, but I didn't remember talking to anyone but maybe a couple friends. But my dad, I do remember my dad went to Philip to ask him if reports concerning what he did to sisters was true, and Philip vehemently denied it again. Okay, so anyway, my point is sisters are not safe if you brothers don't protect us from predators. And I would add, sisters and brothers aren't safe, because there have been brothers that have been victimized too by leading ones. I can mention first names. One's name is Don, who's now with the Lord. He passed away in Illinois because you don't have to register as a sex offender there. Another brother is named Robbie, who molested brothers in Ohio. So brothers and sisters are not safe if you're covering up sins. But I would get back to sisters specifically because I feel that Brother Lee's words about sisters just needing to be quiet, not opening your mouth. Satan's way to tempt you is to open your mouth. Oh, Satan's way is to tempt you to open your mouth. You know what? There are prophetesses in the Bible, and in the New Testament it says your sons and your daughters will prophesy. And yet we're told that not even to speak good things and good doctrines, heavenly and spiritual, is idle talk. There's no need to talk about them. Okay, I'm just going to stop here and let you all digest this, but this is what the Living Stream, or some of what the Living Stream has published. And I'm obviously clearly upset about it, but I believe it's my spirit that is upset about this. And I pray that the Lord would really thoroughly deal with this, because I am all about submitting to my husband, but he was abusing me. to where I couldn't even physically, like I didn't have a home for months. And none of you did anything. And none of you did anything when you knew that Philip Lee was molesting sisters. Or some of you tried, maybe. But those that tried, I think, have all been excommunicated or left because it was completely futile. Okay, thanks for listening. I do love you all. I do speak these things in love. I speak this against Satan because sisters matter. We affect our... Anyway, I'm not going to even try to justify our value. We matter. Every brother and every sister matters and should be safe in a church. And if they're not safe, it needs to be dealt with properly. Thank you. I would like to just add briefly to my video. When sisters were meeting in Anaheim, there was a lot of blessing from the report from Sandy Rappaport, and it was sanctioned by Witness Lee and encouraged, and they met with elders each week to just share about what was going on and all that. It was only after Max Rappaport confronted Philip Lee at that restaurant, and Philip Lee got so angry that those sisters, that Max Rappaport was basically dismissed and evilly spoken of, and his wife, that group they were ridiculed as being holy sisters. And it's that which happened in Anaheim, and then something of sisters meeting together to care for one another in Texas that Benson Phillips is referring to as being factions, sects, parties of sisters in the church life. And this just breaks my heart because I believe all of us need vital groups, if you can call it that. I mean, because I'm using Brother Lee's term, I think, but all of us need companions, or in Venice Church, they call it growth groups, circles. Anyway, I'm just really, really grieved. So bear with me and my heart being so saddened to read the attitude, and it has really made some husbands, including my own and including my in-laws, to justify completely unjustifiable behavior. And again, it doesn't just affect the women or the individual, but their entire community, including if they have children. Anyway, I could go on forever, but I won't. Good night.